Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we're going to do something a little special. Today we want to talk about Synology Surveillance Station 9.1.1. A number of you might already have a Synology NAS knocking around your home or business environment, or you're on the verge of buying a Synology NAS and have heard about Surveillance Station and are wondering, is it worth the extra bit of bunts to go for a Synology NAS just because of Surveillance Station? Now, in this video, we're going to be looking at the software itself. We're going to be looking at some Synology branded cameras to have a little look at some of the Edge AI supported services, and throughout the course of this video, we're going to be utilizing the desktop client application and utilizing the web browser. Ultimately, hopefully by the end of this video, I'll be able to help you decide whether Synology Surveillance Station application and its range of cameras, apps and services deserve your data. Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to do a kind of massive big review slash overview of Synology Surveillance Station 9. Now, Surveillance Station for me is one of the main reasons why I would buy a Synology NAS. They have a bunch of other apps in DSM, the collaboration suite, third-party application support, VMs, Cloudplex, you name it, all of that stuff. However, when it comes down to it, their inclusive surveillance software, current version Surveillance Station 9.1.1, is arguably one of the best, if not the best, inclusive surveillance MVR platform in the market. It's won countless awards, it arrives with camera licenses that are lifetime based, and they are constantly developing into it to a point where they've even started rolling out their own cameras. Now, in today's video, I'm going to go through as much of Surveillance Station 9.1.1 that I think is appropriate to most users and hopefully help you decide whether a Synology NAS with Surveillance Station is right for you. But before we go any further, we've got to knock out some disclaimers straight off the bat. Number one, we are utilising a DVA1622. Now, the DVA1622 from Synology is an NVR targeted NAS. It has 8 camera licenses included. It knocks around for about 600 Nika, depending where you are in the world. And alongside that, it has AI assisted analytics services. So when we do talk about those later in this video, do know that they are not available on all Synology NAS, but when I do show them, I will highlight it. But just bear in mind that there'll be a few things in today's video that you will not be able to take advantage of unless you buy a DVA1622 or a DVA3221. The first one being about 600 Nika, the other one being about $2,500, but more on that later on. Next up, when it comes to utilizing this device, I will be utilizing the Windows desktop client most of the time, but I will also be accessing the web browser as well, because I think it's really important to show you that you can do both on this. So I'm going to make a point of hopping between them just to show you how capable the software can be. And finally, although you see an enormous feed of 15 different images here on my monitoring center feed, do know that I'm only utilizing a handful of cameras. I'm utilizing 2 Synology cameras, a TC500 and a BC500, and I'm using 2 Reolink cameras, one dome, one bullet camera there. I'm using those to compare against Synology's cameras because I do think we should touch on their own surveillance cameras, and we will later on, that they have not only their own surveillance software and NAS devices, they also have their own cameras. I'm also utilizing a Pixel 6 Pro and Synology's own application, so if you want, you can turn mobile phone devices into a surveillance camera if you choose to, directly from your user interface here. You can download the app onto your Android device, turn them on, and then boom, add it as another camera feed. You can even turn the camera on your mobile device into a live streamable camera on YouTube, or use one of your existing IP cameras in your home environment into a live streamable camera there. But onto the review. Now, straight away, one of the killer features of Synology Surveillance Station is what you're looking at here. It's an adaptable feed, and it will be a little sluggish here on the web browser. And again, we are running here OBS in the background. That's also got me recording in the corner with our Elgato. So we are going to be hitting the system resources pretty hard in this review. So you're going to have to accept a drop in the frame rate occasionally. But whether you're accessing this in the web browser or you're accessing it here via the desktop client application, you're still going to get a great adaptable experience. For example, if if we choose to, we can go ahead and save this feed here that we've created here, this new layout. And if we go back into this, we can go ahead, restart this application here, and that new feed that we just created will be readily available there. So let's go back into Synology Surveillance Station Client, open it up. And as we add more feeds and create our own routines for notifications and alerts, they're accessible either on a mobile phone device, on a tablet, on a Mac or Windows system, and of course in the web browser. Now, to break things down on this layout, we have got here several, we've got the Synology cameras here. We've also gone into a zoom in. I'll just log in there. And again, you can use encryption as well. We've created a map here because what you can do within this is upload a blueprint of your home or business environment for you to then manually assign cameras to if you choose. Let's go back into the monitoring center on the client app there. Bring that back down there. On top of that, you can connect to Google Maps or OpenStreetMaps to add your location onto an accessible camera feed. So if you've got multiple locations over a larger environment, you can add all of those individual cameras, and you can adapt a lot of these camera views as well easily. One thing you may have noticed here at the top is this camera feed here, it's raining, but yet in this camera feed here, it's sunny. Why is that? Because this camera feed I'm using to look at footage from 5:30 a.m. You can run cameras either in one feed to some of them show the past and some of them show the present. So you're able to not have to suspend a camera's view in order to look at old footage. You can go ahead and go straight into the feed and access an old camera footage. And if you want, you can make it bigger so it can occupy more space and the rest of the adaptive theme will react. Again, you are going to see a drop in frame rate while I'm doing that because of OBS. But again, whether you want to use live or the past, if we go in and now using this camera feed here, we can cycle into the past, or we can look at other recordings there from previously in its recording pattern. Let's zoom out there while it's doing it. And then on top of that, while it's doing all of this, what we can do is start adding new feeds if we choose. So say, for example, we had multiple cameras in multiple locations. We can drag that into that box, select if we had another camera feed, click OK. Another map feed, and it will add it there. And again, you can play with that, zoom in and out just like you can with all the other cameras, which allow you to take an instant snapshot, which will then be saved locally if you choose, or you can go ahead and zoom into certain areas of the camera. You can also create a manual recording that's saved locally to your device if you choose to. And again, you can do that whether you're using the client application or otherwise. So let's switch over to the client for a bit. So we can show that you can do both at any time. Let's click save on that, minimize that client and close it there. On the web browser, if we go into the client here, while it refreshes that page there, we can do pretty much all of the controls we want. So for example, if we go for this feed, let's create a brand new feed here, a new general layout feed. Now into this new feed, we can dump ourselves a couple of cameras right here. So we'll chuck those in. We're going for the two Synology cameras, but we don't have to go for those. Actually, we'll just use the one camera. I think this will make our point a little bit clearer. So one of the earliest things we can do is a instant smart search. So let's do a smart search on this area here. And what this does is based on the history, we're now able to see all the things that have happened in that area. Now, depending on the cameras you use, such as the Synology cameras having kind of edge detection services, so it knows the difference between people and vehicles. It knows when something's moved in and out of a field of play. On the right hand side of the screen, you can see that it is now cycled through the past to find all the instances of motion and movement there in there. Now, of course, we've selected an area that's got cars moving around. That's not going to be great for us. So let's try a new area down here where there are no cars moving. And as you can see, it has now allowed us to see when people move in and out of the field of view, like a courier there in a lovely salmon shirt. And that can be done within those, but also it can be done in the larger feed. So if we go back to that larger feed, and we won't save the one we just created, from the larger feed there, we can choose to just go ahead and repeat that same process, but this time within the broader feed. And it does it there. We've selected the camera, and on the right hand side of the screen, it has now started filtering through all of the different elements. And again, we can select vehicles, but then of course that was when the camera was pointing at a different angle, or we can say we only want to look at people alerts. And again, the instant search can do that while you're in the larger feed. Also, it's worth highlighting, if your network bandwidth or even your system hardware is getting a little bit battered, you can of course right click and change the streaming profile. This allows you to either have the camera running full guns blazing at the highest resolution it supports, at the highest frame rate, at the highest bit rate, or you can lower it down, and all of these things can be configured from the camera panel. The camera panel allows you to adapt a lot of the features and functions of the cameras. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about Synology cameras. This is more about the software than the hardware, but I will say that when it comes to the features of a camera, if we use this third-party one here, a Reolink one, and we go to the editing settings there to change a lot of the parameters, how it's recording, when it's recording, are we using encryption and more, there's less options to play with here. All of the features of that camera would be available on a Synology camera here, and from there we can enable some of that edge level stuff. Now, again, Surveillance Station is the thing that's interpreting all of this information. So we have to find a line between what the camera is doing and what the software is doing. So if we look at, for example, here with regards to the output, what we can choose to do is encrypt a lot of the transmissions that we're getting. We can change and restrict camera access if we want to different users. If we want, we can change the output there and the recording compression rate, which is quite handy. You can even change a lot of the picture quality and saturation, although I will say I'd leave most of that by default. But there is an auto day and night switch you can even schedule as well, instead of having an auto switch depending on your area. And if you want, you can change how information is displayed on screen, like any other camera within the software. But it's the things like the privacy mask that allow you to block and cover certain areas. It's areas such as utilizing the watermark feature, which are built in as well. All of these can be adapted from within the software very, very quickly and easily there. And overall, when it comes to setting schedules and how things are recorded, there's a lot of options there too. So again, whether you want to utilize SD cards or third-party recording areas, what streaming patterns you want to utilize when the cameras are recording. So if you want them to only kick in to high quality when a certain kind of alert kicks in, you can adapt all of those very, very easily. The edge recording, as mentioned, is when you've got an SD card inside the camera, and therefore the camera is not only recording to the NAS, but it's also recording to the SD card. And in the event that the camera loses connection with the Synology NAS in Surveillance Station, it will then start recording to the SD card, and when connection is re-established, it will then synchronize those recordings with the NAS in the background. Now, we talked about event detections, and a lot of these within Surveillance Station will depend on the cameras you choose to use and the power of the device you're using. If you're using a more value series NAS, like an ARM-based NAS, the number of these things you can do and the extent to which some of them can be done at all will scale down. So, for example, motion detection is available on all of the systems. Audio detection is camera dependent in a big way, and tamper detection is fairly widespread, but again, the cameras themselves may have some good services you can take advantage of. But if you're using one of Synology's cameras or an ARM Crest camera, which some of their AI services can be used within the Surveillance Station application, you've got things, and again, this is dependent on the camera and the NAS you're using. If you want to take advantage of a lot of these analytical and intelligent detection systems, but you can detect people, you can detect when people are hanging around in a given area too long, you can detect if there's too many of them in a given area, you can detect if vehicles enter a certain area, if a vehicle arrives and doesn't move. All of these things are adaptable, and then within the parameters area, you can set where you want these areas of effect to actually be impactful. Same goes with intrusions. You can draw lines in certain areas, and again, you can change all different rules for all of the individual cameras within Surveillance Station, so you can create a very intricate net of how your area is monitored, and when you want specific rules such as cars or people entering areas that they shouldn't, or leaving things that they shouldn't, doesn't have to be a bomb, but it could be something dodgy. All of those things can be adapted very, very easily. And if you go back to the camera feed, the larger camera feed, some of those settings are visible there on the feed. You'll be able to see some of the lines and the detections visible to you there on the top right. As you can see, and we can maximize those out. Let's full size that a little bit and see some of those areas where I've set it up. For example, in the face vehicle detection, I'm sorry about the drop in frame rate, where if you want to know that the camera has detected someone entering that field, you can have it so that is visible within the larger feed. And again, it's always adaptive, so it will always change back into the original format very quickly. Now, how about we talk about when information is received by the NAS within Surveillance Station? Again, it is going to depend on the NAS that you choose to use, and it is going to depend on your cameras. But to give you a perfect case scenario, we can go into the recordings area, and we can go into the video analysis and facial recognition area there. Now, when it comes to general recordings, as you can see here from the middle of the screen, we're seeing a slight bit of slowdown there as we do a million things with our PC. You can see all of these individual recordings here that have been based on motion detection, person detection, and each of them all broken down into what they represent and what they can do. And again, you can download them all, lock them all, or you can add them all together very easily, or break down into just specific motion detection, and then it will all be broken down into there. And again, a lot of these will appear on the right hand side of the screen if you want them to be seen on the larger feed. Or you can set these up as individual recordings which are accessible here, or you can set up notification and action rules so that in the event of certain events taking place based on your parameters, again, loitering, too many people, cars entering a field of play, people crossing lines, you can have certain actions where specific people are notified, or certain actions are taken by the system or the camera itself, which may have alerts and alarms take place. Now again, if you're using a camera that has people and vehicle detection, that could be accessed here for more information on cars that may enter the field of view that you don't want to be there, or specific vehicles you want to be notified about. But that is when we're entering the field of DVA, or Deep Video Analysis devices. Now these are when the system not only knows what a person or a car is, it understands the lines and the guidance rules, removing my cat from the field of view, but it also understands and has recognition of that stuff. So to put that into perspective, if we go into the facial recognition area, we're able to see with the recognition results, in the face detection, we've already added these faces to the database. And from the recognition results, it will allow us to see all the people that have entered that field of view. And as they enter the field of view, the recognition results will then tell us. And as new faces arrive, they will arrive here. And then we'll know if it's a person that's known or unknown entering the premises there. If we come out of that one then, back into the deep video analysis, this is when we know these alerts have been triggered, and we can filter down quite extensively into different times of day, and we can also go into the task area and the recording area to filter things down by, again, whether it was a person, whether it was a vehicle, whether it was a motion detection, whether it was loitering. All of these things can be adapted very, very quickly within the system to give you tailored alerts and also tailored actions to your own specific needs. Now, as easy as it is to set up those AI tasks in Surveillance Station on DVA NASes, it's worth highlighting that there is an extent to which you can use them, and it will be dependent on the system. As I say, some lesser powered systems do not even have DVA analysis, and the ones that do still have limitations to how many you can utilize. So, for example, in the DVA 1622, if I try to do facial recognition here, as you can see, it's not allowing me to do it. Now, why is that? That's because I'm already running two analysis tasks in the background. Analysis tasks in this case being people and facial people and vehicle recognition, as well as that line intrusion that we talked about earlier on, which allows us to monitor when people enter a certain area and us to be notified, and even people counting can be supported. Now, if we disable these one by one, that will free up the system resources in order for us to create our facial recognition task. So again, we can select which camera we want to use, and it's a real shame there isn't a live feed of that camera, by the way, on the right hand side of the screen. But again, we can say allow block to have certain color coded events, and then select where in the camera feed we want this alert to take place. And again, we can run it to be very specific to a small area or the whole camera feed. You can run different tests, and then from there we've now got facial recognition tasks running, and as people enter that field of view, that is where they will appear on that database there we mentioned earlier. But once again, because of the DVA being a more modest powered system, if we go back into the analysis, we try to re-enable one of these, it won't allow us to do so. So do bear that in mind, that Surveillance Station, although it does have all these fantastic features, a lot of those features are quite resource prohibitive, and they can result in you not being able to do everything you want to do. Now, you can counter that in other ways. So, for example, if we go ahead and edit this task, one of the things we can do is set a schedule. So you can go ahead and say, I want facial recognition during that part of the day. So say I want to remove every part of the day with the exception of the middle part of the day, Monday to Friday. So working hours, wallop, nice and quick. So now I can have it so that facial recognition is active during that time. Now, if I clicked apply, that means facial recognition is now on. Now, that does allow me to then head over to, if I enabled it, I could head over to the deep video analysis there and do a new deep video analysis task. This new analysis task, I can do people and vehicle detection, give it any old name there, we'll just put in 1, 2, 3, 4. From there, we'll select next. From there, we say whether we want to do the people, the loitering, all of those things, license plate recognition if I'm using a DVA appliance. And then from there, I can choose if I wish to then set up a schedule on that task. So that means that task I can have running at other times of day, so it doesn't interfere with the other task. So even though Surveillance Station is running some pretty intensive resource tasks, we can at the very least schedule them at certain times of day. So during the night, I want to know whether people are coming up to my door. I want facial recognition. But during the day, I'm there. I want to know about if cars turn up. So you can, all of these different alerts, be they motion or intelligently based, can be scheduled at different times. It's just a shame that there isn't a massive schedule overview that I could find that allowed me to see the whole schedule in a more visually representative way. Now, there are some neat small little features of Surveillance Station. I don't think anywhere near enough. So I've squeezed them all into this section so I can talk about lots of the little features. So for example, we've already kind of talked about one earlier on, and that is the utilization of a mobile device like this one down here, which, if we zoom out, allows us to use a mobile phone as a live surveillance camera feed. What an unflattering photo that was. Now, that is just one of the features in the App Center. In the App Center, there are lots of individual apps for you to take advantage of to make the most. Much like DSM itself having individual apps, you can add IP cameras, IP speakers, you can add surveillance control peripherals to the device. This NAS itself has an HDMI and KVM standalone surveillance support there. Then you've got the option to turn the camera into the YouTube feed, the option to turn your phone, as mentioned, into a camera, edge recording, as mentioned, and there are just loads of different options that you can install into the device to really make the most of that. But some of the other things that don't really get anywhere near enough credit, as mentioned, Smart Search we talked about earlier on, and Smart Search, rather than within the camera feed, you can go ahead and run into the Smart Search and do Smart Searches for specific triggers. So not just motion detection, but using it in conjunction with a number of the other edge AI services or more intelligent recognition. You can run that. So if you want to know over the course of 3 days, for example, that an object went missing, you can scan an area on the camera feed, then run a smart search over a given period of time to see if an item has gone missing in that time. So for example, we have to select the zone, so I'm going to select the whole area because we don't know where in here something might move. Say an item is in one area of the feed, but then isn't there at a later point. This will, if it stays in an area, it gets recognized as a missing object and will be triggered on the right hand side. So for example, although I should have really prepped for that a little bit more, what we can also do is go ahead and pause it there, go for a motion detection, look at a certain area, and again, we'll go for the whole area there, click play, and this will then tell us when things are moving. And as you can see on the right hand side of the screen, throughout this recording here, which took place around about half a day, specific motions as we flick through will start to appear on the right hand side of the screen to let us know significant things took place. And again, it will be very bespoke on your own personal setup. Another thing is smart time lapse. Smart time lapse allows you to take extended periods of time and compress them substantially. You can set this up in a number of very specific ways. And you can even set up the ratio. So you can, by default, for example, the ratio, if we just put something there, The ratio there is set to every 6 minutes is corresponding to 24 hours, but you can adapt that to your own needs. You can do that to new recordings moving forward on a schedule, or you can apply it to old recordings. So as you can see here, what we can do is a recording here at the bottom. This was 1.6 days that was compressed into 3 minutes and 44 seconds. And what this has is all of the footage of me setting these cameras up for the first time and moving very, very fast around my room, around the front room there, and that was when I was moving the camera around for the first time. But just bear in mind, again, you're going to see a drop in frame rate because of OBS that I'm running here. And if we look at the utilization here, OBS is eating the lion's share of my resources while doing this. Another cool feature that's rolled in, if we have a look at it there, is of course home mode. Now home mode allows you to take a mobile device like this one and synchronize it with your NAS via your local area network and Wi-Fi. The result is you can have specific recording patterns and alerts that kick in when you leave the house. So if you leave the house, you take your phone, the minute you break out of the Wi-Fi zone, the NAS, the NVR and all the cameras will now trigger into the surveillance schedule that you set up, all of the alerts, all of the triggers. And when you come home and your phone reconnects to the Wi-Fi, home mode sends a signal to the NAS, which then disables all of that recording. It allows you to have a lower friction recording environment and not have to keep playing with all of the triggers if you have a more sporadic personal work schedule where you're not exactly gone 9 to 5 every day. Now, what about the recordings themselves? Because it's one thing for us to look at the recording area there and access all these things via the web browser and via the desktop, but at the same time, you want to know that the picture quality you're getting is as good as possible. Luckily, you can set things up in the individual camera settings mode to allow you to scale recordings to be at the highest possible quality when you download them, depending on the stream quality you chose during the setup of each camera. Case in point, if we have a look here, we've got a couple of recordings that I made earlier on showing off the original camera recording, downloading one of these original recordings of motion around the camera. Again, you can set those up and download them either directly from any individual feed. You can go ahead and go for a live camera record there, so at any point you can go ahead and just immediately download, and it will ask you to give you the frame of reference and the timeline that you want to download from. The same goes, again, you can protect it, add a watermark to know that those things are safe and proprietary. You can even download reports. This allows you to put together a whole concise case of all of the recognition of the cameras, all of the individual alerts and how things are triggered, and hell, you can make your way into the application center again and use some of the more enterprisey tools for video integrity checks there. You can run a lot of individual tools that allow you to make the most of your surveillance setup using proprietary first-party apps. And then you can run off-site recordings, synchronized recordings, because bear in mind, again, we've touched on this before, that even the DVA NAS systems have full access to Synology's DSM platform as well. So Hyper Backup, Active Backup Suite, all of these gateways and all of these applications for synchronization and backup for a multi-site environment for not only surveillance, but everything else under the Synology umbrella are included here. When it comes to adding those maps that I mentioned earlier on, just go into the map section, and from there it gives you some very concise options. Number one, you can go ahead and choose a new image map, and this is going to be one that you might use for a business with a blueprint that you've got or something you can draw up yourself. With a lot of support there, you can just browse and then just dump the image in there. So for example, if we add an image map there, we'll go into my download section. I believe there was an image that I downloaded for the previous map there. So we can go ahead, add map 1, give it a name, call it map 2. Go in there, click OK. It opens up, and then from there we've got our new map. So then from there we can go into map group and start adding our cameras. So say for example we want to set up a brand new camera there. We can go ahead, drag that camera and say that there's a camera there. Again, forgive the drop in frame rate, OBS, as mentioned. And then from there, we can say that camera's got that viewpoint. We can scale things quite accordingly. And we can say that I'm here in a different room and I'm not here, but we're just going to add it there and then add that Pixel 6 Pro into that corner, which allows us to then set up that camera to record, set up on the 3D display where that camera is there. From there, we can go ahead and save that. We've got our new map running there. But what if we want to add the broader map, the much more long distance map there? Well, you can. You can add a mapping service from the likes of Google. You can add OpenMap. OpenMaps is the free one, and that allows you, if you've got a multi-site camera environment, to add lots of them there. And you can zoom right on in and assign those cameras accordingly to that larger map view. And again, all of these can be added on the fly into your feed along with everything else. And again, you can add off-site cameras too into this perfect central surveillance environment. Now, as mentioned earlier on, there is support of edge recording. That is to take advantage of an SD card that's inside a camera so that if there is a severed connection with the NAS, the camera can utilize the local storage to keep recording and then synchronize with the NAS later on. But that's not the only option open to you, because you also have support of Synology's C2 Surveillance. Now, C2 Surveillance takes advantage of their subscription cloud platform, and it allows you over different kinds of subscription service with them to maintain an off-site record of your recording. So when your alerts do happen, your cameras will send to the surveillance NAS, but also via the NAS, also update to the cloud there. Now, again, it is a subscription service. There is a free trial available, but it's worth highlighting when you do want to take advantage of C2. C2 Surveillance is going to set you back a different pricing depending on the extent to which you need it. That pricing, as you can see there on screen, it's not cheap, but it's not overtly expensive. I'm kind of sad that Synology don't include maybe one C2 license. I know they provide the trial. I know I view this slightly different to a lot of people, and you are getting perpetual camera licenses as well. It is worth touching on that. You do get that included, at least with your local cameras. But if you go for, say, the basic package where only the events are maintained for a certain period of time, that's going to work out €10 or so per year per camera. And again, they do scale up accordingly, and you can find out more about the individual plans and whether they're worth going for. They're tailored to your needs. But if you take surveillance camera footage and recordings very, very seriously, and you're concerned about someone breaking in and nicking the camera, and therefore the surveillance recordings are gone, unless you're using NAS to NAS offsite backup, which is effectively the same as NAS to cloud depending on your setup anyway, this might be something that appeals to you, or it might be something you've already got conventionally taken care of. Ultimately, having a more tailored surveillance cloud target is going to be beneficial to some. And depending on the retention policy of whether you want live recordings or just alerts and how many cameras you want to run, this may be something that's attractive to you. Ultimately, I don't think I've been that secretive about just how much I like Surveillance Station, and the fact that Surveillance Station isn't like a standalone thing, but it's included with almost every Synology NAS, for me is what makes it unquestionably incredible as a surveillance platform. It's very hard to be critical about a software that's part of a larger operating system from Synology NAS. And yet, even though it's part of DSM, it still is, within its own right, an incredible piece of software that I do believe, and I'm surprised that Synology have not sold independently. And if you look into all of the individual apps and services that you can download for Mac, Windows clients, for Android clients, for iOS clients, and if you go into the camera feed, just the sheer scalability and customization and adaptiveness. For example, I didn't even touch on that. Remember I showed you earlier on that you can show a feed from the past and at the same time as a feed from the future? Well, synchronize it, and then you can get every single camera to show exactly what that camera feed was earlier today all at once. Or unsynchronize them and then have one camera go back to the past at silly o'clock in the morning when it was wazzing down with rain and all the other ones being live. It's that adaptive. Had I not been running OBS, you would have seen the frame rate a little bit higher. For me, it's still been very smooth all the way through. And ultimately, it's why Surveillance Station for me, particularly in version 9.1.1, is almost as good as I think it could ever be. But never say never, there could be new features. Ultimately, if you care about your surveillance, if you want a feature-rich and often updated environment, this is pretty much the go-to these days because it's inclusive of the software. It's not perfect. I would say that it still could be a little bit more user-friendly in when you are assigning tasks and assigning triggers to individual cameras when you have to go by the name strategy, and they are repairing that with camera feeds and shots just to give you some idea of which cameras which. Also, I wish there was an overarching surveillance schedule feed. I wish I could see the schedule in a kind of mapped out line form. That would be nice, but with the exception of that, there really isn't much I can fault about Surveillance Station overall. Even the camera licenses, as obnoxious as some people find them, there's still no avoiding that they are lifetime licenses, and if you go for the right system, like the DVA1622 here, you get 8 included anyway, which means that either you go for a Synology NAS with 2 cameras and get some licenses, or, as we go into the license center here, you can go for a NAS that not only has 8 camera licenses included with it, but if you use Synology's own cameras, they don't use a license. You can see 3 licenses used, despite the fact that we have got 5 cameras running right now. Well, actually, they've disabled the mobile camera. But the fact still remains that the Synology cameras, again, lifetime license included inside those with the software. So at least there's a bit more flexibility now in 2023 and 2024 moving onwards for Surveillance Station. And ultimately, Surveillance Station for me is still an absolute banger of a software for those seeking their own bespoke and incredibly reliable NVR service. Thank you so much for watching. I know this has been a long video and it has been dull in points, but I've never really deep dived as much as I have into Surveillance Station as this, and I really thought it was long overdue. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Maybe there's something I've missed. I apologise for the drop in frame rate throughout this video. It's going to be inevitable. And if you want to see something more specific on this, or maybe a tailored comparison of how Surveillance Station acts on this compared with a more value series NAS, do let me know in the comments. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.